So we've got the drawer box components all lacquered and drying over there. While that's happening, I'm going to do the drawer fascias. We're not using little knobs on this. I want a flat, a flush front as possible. Because as I say, space is really tight in this, where it's going to finally be. So I'm using a drawer pole router bit in the router table, which gives this kind of profile, if you can see that. It's just enough space to get your fingers in there. But what I don't want to do, and most of the time that's fine when the drawers are lower down, but when the drawers are higher, you can't quite get, it's going to be tight to get your fingers in there when you've got the desktop on there as well. So what I plan to do is I'm going to do 2 passes on it, just to get that down a little bit deeper, just to give ourselves a bit more finger space in there. So that's the first pass done. And before we go further, a quick word about dust collection. It really helps if you have your router and bits plugged into the socket that fires up the dust collector automatically. Ah, jeez, can't believe I did that. So with the first pass made, we can set the fence back by 12mm and make our second pass on the test piece. Okay, so we've got a very slight discrepancy just on the very on one of these very edges. That'll sand out nice and easily. It's a little bit taller in profile than I'd like, but when you get to have that directly under a desktop like this, that gives you a bit more space to get your fingers in there. So it's something I'll live with. I might just put a slight round over on this top edge, but I think we'll run the rest of them like that, and then we can carry on. Happy with the cut, we can run the rest of the drawer fronts through. And with the routing all done, I'm just dry fitting the drawer box to make sure there aren't any issues. The bases need the edges easing a little with a hand plane to help them fit into the grooves snugly. So I'm making the desk top out of birch ply, just because it's going to be open and closed a lot, and I want the hinges to have a bit more to bite into than MDF. I'm using these sort of flap hinges, you know, the type of thing. They sit completely flush when they're open, and when they're closed they actually present quite a nice sort of knuckle. It's not an unpleasant thing to look at, but I've never used them before. I've got 4 of these, 4 little cutouts to do, and they're a little bit fiddly, a little bit more complicated because of the shape of the knuckle and the extra little bit at the back there. So I'm going to cut a couple of test ones to try it first, and of course I've made myself a little jig with a bit of trial and error, and then annoyingly I've got to change the bit to do the last little bits and pieces. So first couple of cuts are just to get the bulk of the hinge leaf cut away, and then the rest will be to just accommodate the little knuckle there. This is where everybody gets to have a good laugh at my exceptionally poor chiselling techniques now. I've opted to use a different router rather than change bits, and it works okay, making a cross cut and a deep cut for the hinge knuckle. Okay, so one of the reasons we do tests, of course, is to try things out and to learn a little bit more information about things. It turns out that the way I had the hinges set up previously, they actually bind. You need about 3 millimeters gap between the 2 leaves of the drop down in order for them to open and close nicely. Even that, they're binding very slightly, so we might make them a little bit deeper again. That's not a problem, it just means that we need to sort of bring the jig forward by a couple of mil. Not the end of the world by any stretch of the imagination, but again, good to know, because if I hadn't have done that, we can fudge it, but then you end up with a 1/16 of an inch gap at the end of the hinge pocket, and that's no good at all. So at least doing it this way, we can bring things forward very slightly, and all will be well, fingers crossed, in the final results. So anyway, with everything set up, the jig, the spacing and the measurements, we can actually get the hinge pockets cut out on these, then we can press on with everything else. With the test done, we can press on with the real thing. First marking out the hinge positions, then using the leaf of the hinge to set the depth on the plunge router, and finally making the cuts for the leaves. Then following up with the second router to clear the hinge knuckles and cleaning up with the chisel as necessary. Okay, I think we can live with that. So we can get that cleaned up, prepped and ready to paint. So I just mark the other screw holes, the screw positions. But yeah, good job. With everything done, the desktops are given a thorough sanding to lose any sharp or splintery edges. So when it comes to the legs, the supports for the desktop, they're pretty straightforward actually. We've got a simple little piece of 15mm MDF here with a 12mm centre section. We'll have a little spacer, top and bottom. Then we'll have another little sort of skin on this side. Just to make the whole leg. And then this central section will just sort of pull out, which will give the support, and obviously there'll be a front sort of capping piece on here which will extend up to the height of the desk. So that will pull out, and when the desktop folds out, that will be supported on here. And it'll also have a little wheel just underneath this central support, and it runs at exactly the same height as the floor. Now you could actually make this incredibly sophisticated and complicated. I've gone for a much simpler route, and I've mounted this middle section on a couple of simple drawer slides, ball race runners. So, you know, they're decent quality ones, they'll last a long time. The drawer slides are simply screwed in place and set at a convenient height, remembering to take into account the thickness of the capping piece and the groove to accept the centre section. And not forgetting to allow clearance for the small wheel and to mark up the domino positions.